Okay, we're going to begin. We're in the middle of the series, The Challenges, Struggles, and Trials of the 21st Century. These are very difficult times to be living in. People are having a hard time financially. People are having a hard time getting married. People are having a hard time staying married. And we sometimes forget that there's another very important area in life that is many, many times unfortunately overlooked, and that is raising children. It is not easy to raise children today. The topic of tonight, therefore, is how to raise children in an age of insolence, in an age where there's so much chutzpah, as it is called in Hebrew, which makes things, of course, a lot more difficult than it was in the past. This is a very big topic. It is a painful topic, but it is of vital importance. Many of us who have children would like to know if there are techniques that can help us succeed. Many parents perhaps don't really care so much about it, and that is part of the problem. There are techniques, there are certain things that must be done in order to come closer to succeeding in this very important area called raising children. Nothing is a guarantee, however, but the more we know, the better we are prepared, the better the chances of success. But this is not an exhaustive lecture of all the information that is out there, whether it's from the Jewish perspective or from what professionals and psychologists have suggested. There's a lot more information than I could present in this lecture. I did, however, cover some ideas in a series that I did many years ago called Essentials of Interpersonal Relationships, which you can also view. The lectures are online. Lecture 11 and 12 deal with the responsibilities that parents have and the best approach on dealing with this important area of educating the children, whether you're a parent or a teacher. Some of this advice that I will present tonight can be very helpful also with dealing with difficult people, which many of us, perhaps just about every one of us, has to deal with sometime during his life. Before we begin, what I'd like to do tonight is give you a little bit of a description of this era that we're living in, according to what the rabbis describe in the Talmud. What we should be expecting, what it will be like living at the time right before Mashiach comes, or as they call it, at the heels of the Messianic era. This is a very, very different kind of a time that does not resemble anything of the past. And that is why they gave us a very clear description of what to expect, what to anticipate, and hopefully we will resort to the best advice that they have to deal with it properly, in order that we do not, God forbid, forget what our mission is and how to go about resolving the many, many issues and problems that we will face. Many people, when facing some sort of difficulty, they just give up. They're lost. They assimilate and they just forget about it, as though the problem does not exist. We have to be cognizant of how life was in the past. In many, many ways, it was so much better. And how, for some reason, it has degenerated. In order to know how to deal with it, how to properly address the problems, we need to become familiar with it. We need to identify what those problem areas are. For some people, there's nothing wrong. Everything is just fine. Everything is okay. Their children are in school. They're getting average grades. They don't realize what is happening underneath the surface. And that is why it's important to learn a little bit about what the rabbis have advised us in what to expect in this generation, a generation that will be so different than the past in many, many ways, and not necessarily good, in good ways. In many, many ways, it will be a very, very big challenge for many of us. And one rabbi even expressed himself, I don't want to be around that time, even though this is an exciting time to be around. Mashiach is coming soon. We can see it and we can feel it. These are very, very special days. In many ways, it's great. Imagine we can fly across the globe in a few hours. couldn't do that in the past. There's many, many things today that are easier. There's definitely a lot more advancement in technology in the medical field. This is in some ways a good time to be living in. On the other hand, it can be very, very challenging, very, very difficult. And this is one area, raising of children, that presents a host of problems that our forefathers, our parents and grandparents did not have to deal with. There were always issues. Raising children was never easy. Even the rabbis had a term for it called sa'ar gidul banim, the pain associated with raising children. It's not easy. It's beautiful when you're able to look back and see, Baruch Hashem, thank God, everything went well, time flew by very quickly, the kids grew up, they're married, they have their own children, and the parents or the grandparents now can be happy with the fruits of their labor. That's if everything turns out to be just like that, so nice and easy. So it was worth all the hard work, but it's not so easy today at all. So in this lecture, I'm going to deal with this topic from the angle of the Kabbalah as well, because in order to understand the problem, we need to take a deeper look at what we're facing. A deeper look means the Kabbalistic approach as to what exactly is happening. Otherwise, it would be very, very difficult to identify or to isolate the real issues that we're dealing with. And there are many, many things going on today. It's not just one problem. And to be able to have clarity, we need to turn to the Talmud, to the Kabbalah, and to take a close look at what we are living through. And not to despair, of course. There is something that we can do about it. There is a way that we can live through this, and hopefully with God's help, succeed as well. So I'm going to describe to you first what the rabbis tell us, what to expect, what will life look like at this time, the Messianic times, right before Mashiach comes. I'm going to just read it in English. In the times of the footsteps of Mashiach, insolence, chutzpah, will increase and honor decrease. The government will turn to heresy, and there will be none to offer them reproof. In other words, if you reprimand them, you tell them off, they won't listen, they wouldn't care less about what you have to say. The meeting place of scholars will be used for immorality. A lot of places where people will gather will be unfortunately places of immorality. That is what people will pursue. The wisdom of the learned will degenerate. Unfortunately, that will not be such a high priority. And those who learn will not necessarily put as much effort into their learning. It will not necessarily be for the sake of God. It will not necessarily be as popular. That's what it means to degenerate. And those who fear sin will be despised by others. In other words, those who attempt and make great efforts to be good people, righteous people, they will be despised. People will make fun of them, look down at them. Why don't you be like everybody else? What are you doing? You're primitive. Truth will be lacking, which I've spoken about many times. Everybody will claim that they have the truth. The truth will be lacking. Nobody will know with clarity what the truth is. Youth will put old men to shame. A shameless society. The old will stand up in the presence of the young. Imagine, the old will stand up for the young. A son will revile his father, will be disrespectful. A daughter will rise against her mother. A daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Well, that was always true, mother-in-laws. But it will be worse. And a man's enemies will be the members of his household, within families. There will be so much divisiveness. The face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. What is a dog? A dog is always barking. Another interpretation of the face of the generation are the leaders. The leaders will not necessarily do what is right. They will always look back like the dog looks back to see who's following him. They will not lead. A dog has chutzpah. A son will not feel ashamed before his father. This is just a brief description. It goes on of what the Messianic era, before Mashiach that is, what it will look like. My question, however, in seeing this is, well, wait a minute. Isn't there a saying in English and in other languages that the apple does not fall far from the tree? Then why aren't children like their parents? Why aren't the parents like their grandparents? It's supposed to be that the apple does not fall far from the tree. Then why can't there be continuity in the values, in what was a priority back then? Why is everything changing? But what happens when there is a storm? When there's a storm, the fruits are scattered far from the tree. If everything was normal, yes, the apple will not fall from the tree. But when there is a storm, a powerful storm, not only are the fruits scattered far from the tree, but many branches are broken and many trees are toppled. Trees toppled? Yeah, entire families are being toppled. Divorce, divisiveness, brothers taking each other to court. Family, how could this happen? Yeah, when there's a big storm, that's what it does to the fruit, that's what it does to the branches, and sometimes even to the trees. We have a lot of prophecies about the end of days. But one prophecy that pertains to what we're talking about tonight is there will be a darkness that will envelop the land. Darkness. When it's dark, you can't see. When it will be dark, as it is today, it will be difficult to ascertain the truth. What is the truth? What should we do? What is exactly wrong? Knowing right from wrong will be much more difficult to figure out. And we've spoken a little bit about that in the lecture of immorality. You know, it appears to be that there are no limits, there are no red lines, there are no boundaries. Why not? What has happened? There's darkness. Darkness causes confusion. It makes it more difficult to see the truth. What is this darkness? What is causing this darkness? What is this storm coming from? The Kabbalah tells us that before Mashiach comes, there will be a tremendous rise in the power of the impure forces. They will dominate. They will rule. They will be very, very strong. The impure forces, as you know, from other lectures, from the Kabbalah, are the ones that oppose anything that is spiritual, anything that is holy, anything that has to do with God and religion. The impure forces, as it's called in Aramaic, in the Kabbalah, the Sitra Achara. And all this Sitra Achara, all this impurity, will cause tremendous confusion. The confusion will be as follows. On the one hand, you will see tremendous progress. Tremendous amount of progress in the world. And that's beautiful. It is really something to admire, actually, if you think about it. All the progress that has happened in the past 100 years or so. So on the one hand, there's a lot of good, if you can call it that. Good, there's progress. On the other hand, if you look at that which is spiritual, there is destruction. So here there is progress, there is advancement physically. On the other hand, there is ruin, there is destruction. That which is spiritual is being looked at in a very, very negative way. It's being despised, as we say. There's so much disrespect for it, much more than in the past. And of course, it's suffering. Anything that is holy, anything that is spiritual will suffer as a result. Less support, less belief, less attachment to it. So it has become weaker. This Sitra Achara, these impure forces, will do battle with anything that is holy. Anytime one wants to champion a holy cause, he will find tremendous opposition. This is pretty much what the rabbis predicted. But don't think that the impure forces can do it so easily. They need help. In order to wage war, you have to have a big army. Where are they going to get the army from? After all, aren't there so many good people in this world who want to do the right thing, who don't tolerate impurity, in decadence. They are against it. So where are the impure forces going to get all their strength from? All their soldiers. The Kabbalah continues on to say, and it's written in the Zohar, as follows. Right before Mashiach comes, the last generation, we are going to see reincarnations of all the most degenerate and corrupt generations that have been before us. The generation of the flood, the generation of Sodom ve'Amorah, the generation of Dora Palaga, the ones who built the Tower of Babel. All the bad guys, if we can call it that, from the past, are going to come back, are going to be reincarnated. And you wonder why. Why, God, why bring them back now? You should have brought them back a long time ago. They should have had their rectification in the past. They should have had a chance in the past to rectify. That's what reincarnation is about. Rectify their misdeeds from before, their sins. But why bring them towards the end? Why now? Why? It's going to make it so difficult for everybody. All these reincarnated souls still have certain inclinations from the past. They come back with the same attitude. They come back with the same problems because they need to be challenged. They need to rectify themselves. And they're not necessarily going to do a good job. The odds are that they're not going to succeed in rectifying themselves. And the Sitra Haran, it knows that these will be good soldiers. All these reincarnated souls will be good soldiers to do harm to that which is spiritual. They're not going to rectify themselves. They won't be interested in this. And they will be tempted, of course. They will be tempted not to rectify, but to put their effort in things that are totally contrary to spirituality. So why does God allow this? Why does He want all these soldiers of the Sitra Achara, of the impure forces, to come back now? Since this is the last generation before Mashiach, this is the last opportunity to do what's called tikkun, rectification. Rectification is on an individual level. When the soul rectifies itself, it's given a second chance to improve or to make up what it is lacking from the past life. Rectification is also on a global level, to rectify the world, to bring this world to understand that there is a creator. That was the mission of the Jew, to be a light unto the nations. We didn't always do the job. We failed many times, unfortunately. The world was not rectified. Mashiach did not come. Had Mashiach come, of course, we would no longer have war. Everything would be peaceful. We would be seeing all the light of God. We would be receiving all the blessing. And that is what will happen when Mashiach comes. But in the meantime, we have so much war, so much strife, so much problem, difficulties of all types, because people are not connected to the right values, the values which our forefathers, generations in the past, did understand. This generation will have a more difficult time connecting to those values because of this tremendous storm, tremendous darkness brought about by the impure forces right before the end. Because if this is the end, and this is the last opportunity to bring about rectification on an individual and on a global scale, the attribute of justice, God has to be fair. He says, if I make it so easy for you, I give you this opportunity and I give you tools you never had before to achieve rectification. What are the tools? All this knowledge that is available on the internet. There's so much knowledge available today, accessible. It's much easier to find out things. There is a lot of darkness. But if you dig, whether you dig with Google or not, I don't care. But if you dig and look for the truth, you will find it. So God has to be fair. I'm giving you the ability to rectify. I'm going to make it easy for you. I mean, it will be challenging, but I will give you the tools that did not exist in the past. Do you know what it is that today on a CD or a DVD, you can have thousands and thousands of books of knowledge, Jewish literature, or some other literature, at your disposal. You can do a quick search, you can know anything you want, get the answer to almost anything you wish. So we have the tools. Hashem says, but I have to be fair. It has to be fair. I give you the tools, then I have to give the other side, the enemy, the tools as well. It has to be a fair battle, a fair challenge. They're going to get very, very powerful tools. Unfortunately, as you know, the movie industry is very, very powerful. Not just a powerful lobby. I don't mean just powerful because they're making tons of money. It's a powerful influence. It's conveying values, but the wrong values. The violence, the pornography. This is not something that only Jews have observed. Even the non-Jewish world is aware of this, of the damage television has done. Kids are suffering because of that. All in the name of free speech, all in the name of entertainment. Yeah, entertainment can be good, but if it's the wrong type of entertainment, it could be very damaging. So God is giving the impure forces the tools as well. So even though we really have a great opportunity to beautify this world, to perfect this world, as many, many have done, science, doctors, chemists, biologists, tremendous progress. They have contributed so much. Penicillin, do you know what penicillin is? How many lives were saved because of penicillin? There's so much good going on, but God has to be fair. At the last generation, where the world is really improving in many ways, physical ways, we would hope that it should also improve in a spiritual way. No, that's not going to happen so easy, because the impure forces have been also given very powerful tools. Therefore, what do? We must be extremely careful. If we don't preserve the values of the past, if the values of our parents and grandparents are not holy to us, do not mean as much to us, then obviously we're going to adapt easily the values of the present. We can't have both. If what was valuable in the past, what was considered important in the past is not important to us, it's no longer applicable, we're going to adapt something. We don't live in a void. Unfortunately, people adopt the values of today because they don't want to hold on to the values of the past. Now, somebody might come and say, but wait a minute, what's wrong with that? I mean, people change, values change, society has changed. Yeah, but the problem is, you don't realize, when we want a child to be connected to the past, to be proud of his past, to be proud of his heritage, we can't afford having him severed from his traditions, from those values. If he's going to sever his tie to those values, then he's going to be completely lost. He's going to be completely assimilated to ways that his parents and grandparents were completely opposed to and would have given their lives to fight it. Comes along this grandson, or great-grandson, he doesn't even fight it. He just goes along with the current, with the stream. So that's really the first step in doing battle with the impure forces, is to hold in high regard the values that meant so much to our forefathers. You know what happens when a child does not hold in high regard the values of his father? He will not hold in high regard his father. If you don't respect your father's tradition, you're not going to respect your father. We're talking about chutzpah here. We're talking about impudence or insolence. It has to do with the past, connecting to the past, staying in touch with the past. If one does not appreciate or hold in high regard his heritage from the past, why should he respect his father? Why should he respect the elders? He'll think he's more advanced than they are. Where is he getting these ideas? From the impure forces. From a degenerate society that thinks that they are more advanced in every way than past generations. You see, it's completely a different type of philosophy. It's a philosophy that's not coming from a holy source. The holy source says something completely different. The values of the holy source are very, very clear. It's to connect yourself with your past, with your heritage, with your faith, with your people. Is that these values, hopefully, you will want to give over to your children. They should be meaningful to you and to them. But one who casts them away easily, one who looks down at them, thinks of them as being primitive, or doesn't make an effort to hold on to them, either way, even if he's not opposed to them, but doesn't make an effort to hold on to them, he's going to be severed. He's going to become disconnected. He's going to fall very far away from the tree. It has happened on more than one occasion that I've had the opportunity to speak to children of Mexican immigrants to this country. And I was very, very disappointed with them, with many of them. I began to speak to them in Spanish, which, to me was just a normal thing to do. Somebody that you think knows your language, you speak to them in that language. And either they did not know, or they were ashamed of speaking the language. Many of them insisted, speak to me only in English. I said, but why? Isn't this your heritage? Isn't this the language of your parents? And it's a beautiful language. Why are you insisting on English? Why do you think that they insisted on English? Because they wanted to be Americans. Very simple. And they don't want it to be reminded of where they come from. They were basically voluntarily losing their original identity. And they were not ashamed about it. On the contrary, they were ashamed to show any connection to the past. That is really a shame. What's so shameful about your past, about your heritage? This is your parents' heritage. This is where you come from. That's what happens to children who don't insist on staying connected to the past, or on parents who don't make it a priority to give over their children their heritage. They will be disconnected. They will fall far away from the tree. We're talking about values. Values need to be taught. Values can be picked up, but it's different when we are taught something than we just pick up something. To teach values means that we put emphasis on them. These are important. Picking up values, we pick up values all the time. In Judaism, there's an emphasis on teaching values. And when does that happen? When do we begin teaching or imparting those values to our kids? When they're young. Why when they're young? Because that is when their retention is better. Up to the age of 10 approximately, when you teach a child a foreign language, they're almost all the same. Chinese is not that much more difficult than Spanish or Portuguese or French or German. They're more or less all alike. An adult begins to have a problem with languages. Some are more difficult to him than others, depending on what his mother tongue is, depending on how complex the language is, the grammar is, the pronunciation, and so forth. Some languages take several years to master, others take several months. It depends, of course, on how gifted the child is or the adult. But there's no doubt that when one is young, that is the best time to learn a language. That is the best time to absorb values. And that is exactly what Solomon tells us. I'm going to translate it in English. Train a child according to his way. Even when he grows old, he will not turn away from it. What does it mean, train a child according to his way? According to his ability and according to his level. 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old. Right? Don't push too hard. Right? according to his abilities, according to his way. And if you do so when he's a child, when he grows, he will not turn away from it. The values that you have given him, that you've implanted, imbued in him while he was young, will probably, there's a good chance, they will stay with him. Try to give it to him when he's an adult. Nah, it won't stick necessarily. It may, but not necessarily. There's a better chance if you start when he's young. That is why you will find in Judaism an emphasis on education from kindergarten, from nursery. Right? Nursery comes before kindergarten, right? From the earliest stages. As soon as a child can begin to talk, what do they teach him? Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. That is the words of praise and gratitude that we give to the Almighty when we wake up every morning. I thank you that you have returned to me my soul. Right? At night we're asleep. The soul, according to our tradition, a part of the soul departs and it returns in the morning. This is a beautiful prayer, and children are taught that. They memorize that. And what follows that? Blessings, all kinds of other blessings. Netilat yadayim, washing one's hands in the morning. When we wake up in the morning, we wash our hands. What's all that? It's not just knowledge, it's discipline. It's values. That is why, when it comes to giving over these values to our children or to students, parents and teachers have to remember, they're not just giving over information. They're giving over the heritage. They're going to be transmitting to a future generation these values. You can't just be a math teacher and teach the child how to add and subtract or how to figure out a certain problem. That's information, that's a skill perhaps. No, it's not about teaching skills and just giving over information. Teaching in Judaism and parenting involves educating. Educating is not teaching. Educating is training the child, guiding him, showing him the way, instilling in him those same values that we held so dear. We can't just teach 2 plus 2. This is not just about information. I'm going to teach you the names of all the stars. What kind of a connection have you made with that child by just giving him over this static information? We want to have a connection to the future generation. We want them to respect us. We want them to respect our values and our heritage. So we need to educate, not just teach information. A father and a teacher, therefore, who implant in this child and this student the values that they held so dear, will be forming a bond with the child, an emotional bond. And sometimes the impact of the teacher on the child and the parent of the child is so strong that it lasts a lifetime. Isn't that beautiful? That a student can remember his teacher, that a son relates to his dad in a positive way for many, many years to come, because the father was not just a biological father. He was a teacher, he was a guide. He cared about giving over to the child those values that he held so dear. And the teacher did not just teach because he wanted to have a salary, because this is what he studied in college, because this is what he knows and he's just going to share information. No, it's not just about sharing information. He really cared about the child. He's an educator. He has the responsibility of educating this child, making sure that since the father doesn't have that much time, he's taking over from the father. He's the second father to the child. That's a Jewish school. The teacher becomes a second father. And hopefully, if he does his job right, he actually forms a bond with that child. And that could be a lasting bond. It's interesting that a ben, or a child, a son in Hebrew, is called ben from the root word boneh, binyan, to build, to construct. A child is being built. He's not just being formed. He's not just growing up. He's being built. Who's building him? Of course, God helps, but it's the father, the mother, the teacher. And by the way, the mother has a lot to do with building the child, in many ways more than the father, because she sees her son perhaps more than the father many times. She takes care of him. She deals with him more perhaps than the father does. So she has a tremendous responsibility in building this child. My father, I remember, spoke to me when I was 10 years old. He had a talk with me, and he told me, my son, 3 years from now is going to be your bar mitzvah. You're going to turn 13. Time goes by very quickly, you know. 3 years is nothing. Before you look around, you're bar mitzvah. You're becoming an adult. You will be assuming responsibilities. Right now, you're still 10. You're like a young tree. I think they call it in English a sapling. In Portuguese, it's muda. In Spanish, it's plantón, or un árbol joven. A young tree. I think in English, it's a sapling or a seedling. You know those young trees that you take from the nursery and you transplant them in your garden. You're a young little tree. You're planted. You're growing. So long as you're still young, 10 years old, 11 years old, and it grew a little crooked, we can always straighten you out. But once you've grown and you've matured, then the trunk has become very wide, and if it's crooked, you can't fix it. You can't straighten it. It's much more difficult. It could break. These are the time to make the proper changes. If something is not right and crooked, let's straighten it out. Be careful that you grow straight. Later on, it will be very difficult to become straight 100%. It's still possible, but it's much more difficult. This is the time to do it. When you're young, a young tree, you can always move it a little bit. So make sure that you avail yourself of this through these 3 years that you have to prepare yourself properly for the coming bar mitzvah. Since we in Judaism ascribe so much importance to education, it is therefore imperative that one not be lazy about it, that one not push off anything that has to do with education of one's child, and that one not compromise when it comes to a good Jewish school, where a child will be spending many, many of his years, where he'll be meeting friends. You can't compromise. Public schools, I'm sorry, are not as good always as private schools. I can't say that about all. Every situation is different, but children need attention. Children need to be amongst good elements. You know, if we really care about this, then we can't compromise. And unfortunately, I've known people who would rather buy a latest car, the new car, spend their money in the car, not on their children. They want free tuition. They want the free schooling. For something that's good, you have to pay. You don't value this investment, your child. You don't want to give them the best teachers. You don't want them to have the best environment, the best chances. Nothing is 100% guaranteed, but don't you want to provide for them the best? The best sometimes costs money, but it's worth it. This is an investment. Unfortunately, there's too many challenges out there. As it is, you want to make it more difficult for him by putting him amongst the wrong people. Teachers who may not care as much, who will not give him the attention that he needs. These are normal ideas that all experts, I believe, would agree with. You can't compromise in education. We have to do our best. And after we've done our best, there's one thing that we still need to do, and that is to pray. Because no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, and how much you do for them, everyone has free will. Human beings have free will. And it doesn't always turn out to be like you want it. So we must never forget that prayer is a powerful tool at our disposal. And we should use it especially to ask our partner. He's our partner. God is our partner. You've helped bring this soul down into this world. Thank you. Help us raise him too. Not just financially, provide for him, as he does provide for every creature in this world. But help us to give him the best education, the best upbringing. So we must pray. Okay, this was all pretty much an introduction, just for us to become a little bit familiar with what we're dealing with, the situation that we are in today. What can we do, however, practically, to shelter our children? I'm using the word shelter because to teach, we may find a good school that does an excellent job in teaching, great teachers, but we have the environment, we have the street, we have all this decadence out there, impurities. We have all these powerful forces that I mentioned earlier to contend with. So here we are doing our best, but is there anything that we can do to shelter the children from all these impure forces that they will need to contend with? Also, the same applies. The second question that one may ask is there anything that we can do that will help us deal with difficult children, difficult personalities, a temperamental one, neurotic disorders, selfish? There's a list of problems, unfortunately, and difficult traits that many psychologists have written about. They've seen it, whether in children or even with adults. I'm sure you've met a bully from time to time. A bully. Difficult people. How do you deal with them? Narcissism. You know what narcissism is? The problems. People have all kinds of issues, difficulties, personalities. So the same question I asked about, is there anything we can do to shelter the children? Is there anything that we can do to help these children who really have a difficulty in their characteristics? So the following pieces of advice are pretty much general. Every situation is different. And all I could say is that keep in mind that what's important, regardless of the advice, regardless of the child, is that there be cooperation and unison between the father and mother. That is very important. That they should both agree as to the right approach to take. If you're having to do battle, husband and wife, about how to raise a child, I don't want to say it's a losing battle, but it's going to be so much more complicated to see good results, immediate results. Okay, so let's begin with as follows. There was once a parent that approached a rabbi for advice with his 5-year-old. Rabbi, thank God, my child is 5 years old. When do you advise that I should begin to educate him? Education. When is the gil achinuch? When is the age when one should really begin seriously teaching him? So the rabbi turns to him and says, you're 5 years late. He's 5 years old, you're 5 years late. What does that mean? That's not a joke. There's a lot of truth to that. According to the Kabbalah, a very important detail in having good children is making sure that the husband and wife, when they are intimate, have clean, pure thoughts. If the husband is drunk, if the husband forces his wife, if the two are on drugs, or if one or the two of them are thinking some terrible thoughts, unclean thoughts, they are determining through their actions what kind of a neshama of a soul will enter that baby. It is very clear in the Kabbalah, extremely clear, that a great deal has to do with how the husband and wife were together when they were intimate. What kind of soul, what kind of a child this will turn out? Will he be a rebellious child? Will he have issues? They talk about smoking when you're pregnant. Obviously, that could be a problem. But that's a physical problem. Here we're talking about spiritual. We're talking about the soul, the type of soul. Even though the soul is divine, there's different kinds of souls. There's different kinds of challenges as a result of the thoughts of the parents. You've heard about birthmarks. They say if a woman craves something when she's pregnant, she will have a strawberry mark? Why? It's cravings. She's just craving about it. Or even looking at something. All of that does have some level of influence over the child. So according to the Kabbalah, the thoughts, how they look at this union, the physical union between them, how they treat it, do they treat it in a holy way, in a special way, in a loving way, will make a difference. What kind of a soul will enter that baby? That's where it all begins. Conception. You're 5 years late. It is important to begin day one with what kind of a neshama is going to enter that child. Once the child begins to grow, then it is important to communicate to him the importance of all these values that we hold so dear. That these spiritual values are more important than all the vanities. But if parents think about money, if that's what they value, big homes, fancy cars, jewelry, fancy restaurants, eating out every other day, this is important to them, and they make a big fuss, a big deal of these, that's what the child is going to emulate. In that case, the apple won't fall far from the tree in a bad way. Or as they say, as father, as son, right? Yeah, but that's not in the best way. So obviously what parents will value, hopefully the children will value. But if they're valuing the wrong things, what can you expect? And that is why we are told that the best teacher is you setting the example. If a parent sets the example, he practices what he preaches. Imagine somebody knocks on the door asking for charity. And you send your child and you tell them, tell this person at the door, Daddy's not home. You're tired, you don't want to be bothered. The child goes to the person and tells him, my father told me to tell you that he's not home. What kind of an example are you setting? You're teaching him to lie. People don't realize that, but they make these kinds of mistakes. To be very careful with what kind of an example you set. Early on, as we said before, that's when the retention is greater. We have to get them used to despising, detesting all the bad qualities of anger, stubbornness, lies, arrogance, vengeance, or making fun of people, or saying lashon hara, in other words, talking slanderous of others. All these terrible qualities that sometimes kids don't realize it because they're children. You know, they have a hard time in certain areas because they think of themselves. This is the time to train them, to get them used to disliking these things. These are terrible qualities. It's a terrible thing to lie. How could you lie? How could you be so arrogant and show off? This is not nice. How could you make fun of this poor little kid? This is the time to do it. Later on, can you expect an adult to read a good book on morals and ethics and remind himself? He may be able to do it, but it takes much more strength and courage to change your nature then, to train yourself. The time to do it is when kids are still young. What do you do if the child is misbehaving? He's a bad child. He's just misbehaving. Very difficult. What do you do? Now, parents and teachers play different roles here. And there's different techniques, and I don't want to review all the techniques. There's quite a few techniques that professionals, experts can share with us what has worked for them. What I want to do, however, is take a different approach here, because the Jewish perspective is many times different than the non-Jewish perspective. We look at the education of a child in different ways. Remember, we're imparting to him values. We're dealing with an individual who will hopefully carry on with the tradition. There's therefore a certain level of responsibility that does not exist in the non-Jewish world. Of course, parents want to give over the best to their children, regardless of one's religion, but there's a different emphasis, different priorities. So techniques abound on how to deal with difficult people, how to deal with difficult children at home and school, but it all depends on the child, depends on the circumstances. There are a lot of kids that come from broken homes, remember. So the treatment or the approach with them is going to be different. So I'm just going to give some general ideas, some basics that are very important to Jewish people. Even though the non-Jewish world will disagree, nonetheless, we hold that this is important. And I'll explain why in a moment. One of them is what Shlomo Melech says, Ivelet shura belev na'ar, shevet musar yarchikena mimena. In English, foolishness is found in the child's heart. The rod of discipline will drive it from him. The rod, oh no, you can't hit a child. I'm sure you've heard that, oh no. Just let him be what he is, speak to him nicely. Let him have it his way. Try something else, give him a candy. Giving him a candy sometimes is good, by the way. You want to reward the child. I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. Why is the rod important? Now, when I say the rod, I don't really mean the rod, the stick. I'm talking about spank. A spank, you know what a spank is, right? Mm-hmm. A spank is not, you're not abusing the child. You're using it, hopefully rarely, but occasionally. Shlomo Melech, the wisest man who ever lived, said it's necessary. Not only important, it's necessary sometimes. Not all the times, sometimes, but you have to use it.
With the left hand, not the right.
I'll get to that. A spank, why? A child needs to develop something called mora of his parents. Mora means a certain level of fear. Not to be afraid of them. Fear is something else. Fear of a parent means respect. It means a certain level of respect. They were my parents. They brought me into this world. They are responsible for me. They take care of me. In order to develop that level of awe, of respect, sometimes there may be a need for the spank. Because a child, if he's unrefined, if he's misbehaving, will not know on his own with logic. Sitting down and talking to him. Talking is important, and that should always be done, regardless. But sometimes it just may be because of the foolishness, the ivelet, in certain children more than in others, that may be what's necessary, what will take it out of him, what will drive it away. Sometimes, I said. And it has to be done carefully. The rabbis advised us as follows. If you spank, always use your left hand. What does it mean, your left hand? It means the weaker hand. Don't do it in an abusive way. Don't do it when you're angry. Don't do it in a cruel way, as a punishment. It's a lesson. Have pity on him. This is for his good, after all. Therefore, use your left hand. What did they say after that? V'yimin mekarevet. Make sure you use your right hand to embrace, to hug, to kiss. What does that mean? The right hand is the stronger hand. Use that one to show the love and affection. But there's a second interpretation that I suggested here. It's not rabbis are not only telling us to use the weaker hand in the discipline, in the physical discipline, and to use the right hand to embrace. Perhaps what they're also saying is, if you did use your hand to discipline, make sure you use your other hand to embrace. Don't, after disciplining, reprimanding, spanking the child, don't just let go. and move out of the room. 5 minutes later, a half an hour later, embrace him, hug him, kiss him. Let him remember that you also love him. Let him not just remember the spank, so you got to make up for it. If you're going to use your left hand to spank, make sure you also use your right hand a few minutes later. Not right away, otherwise you're going to confuse him. Was this supposed to be a spank or what? Was it a joke? Not right away. Sometime later, make sure you also show your right hand, the hand of love and affection. If you don't use this rod when necessary, what will happen, the rabbis were concerned, is that you will be led by the child to do what he wishes instead of what you wish. The rabbis were concerned, the Torah was concerned, that one should not be led by the child. The child has to be led by the parent. There has to be a certain level of fear and respect. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes a spank, that rod of discipline is necessary to take out the foolishness. You see where Judaism is a little bit different than 21st century psychologists talking about how, oh, don't you dare do that. But it's wrong. Obviously, there's a lot more that has to go into disciplining a child than just using a spank. It requires other techniques too. I mean, people have to use this intelligently. Rabbis told us don't spank a teenager. Be very careful at that stage in life. No. It's terrible to do that then. It's counterproductive. So be careful. Only when they're small and only for some terrible things. What's a terrible thing? If the child hits somebody else, did it more than once, that would be an example. No, this is wrong. If he doesn't get it, sometimes you need to spank. And I said spank for a good reason, because people think to hit, when we say to hit, oh, to hit means to hit with a stick. No, a spank is not a stick. And sometimes it is necessary. Very important to keep in mind that when we're dealing with difficult children, right now we're talking about difficult behavior, whether a student or a child, some children just happen to need more attention. And because of that, what's required of the parent or the teacher is more patience. That's all. In other words, we said before that not everyone is the same. There are some that are really difficult, and because of that, they just may need more attention. And more attention requires more patience. More guidance. The child just may need more guidance. What can we do? They're not all created equal. A lot of times, it requires tremendous sensitivity, to try to figure out what this child needs, how to deal with him, and for that you have to listen to him. Listen. And with listening comes better communication, because once you hear what he has to say, oh, I didn't realize that was on your mind, that was bothering you. Sensitive children, issues that sometimes we don't know what to do. And that leads us to a very important point in raising children or in teaching students. If you can't fix the problem, if it's too complicated, you need to send him to a professional. Kids today are on medication, much more than in the past for some reason. They're growing up in homes that are broken. There are a lot of broken homes, more than what we know. So we don't know where he's coming from, if it's a student. Or even if it's in your own home. Who knows what he saw at school, what he's going through. If he doesn't talk, how is he going to talk if you don't talk to him? So communication is very important. It is advisable to be very, very careful not to insult the child, not to embarrass him, not to point out his mistake, not to tell him how bad he is. To point out how bad the behavior is, not how bad he is. It's not a good idea. It sometimes backfires. It's not good for the child to tell him, you're no good, you're bad. Talk about the behavior instead of him. Don't be so personal about it. There's an old interpretation of a very famous verse in Proverbs, in Mishlei. Solomon tells us, "Hocheach lechacham b'yaveka." Don't waste your time rebuking the fool, the clown, the mocker. Rebuke the intelligent individual, because he'll love you for it. Because he appreciates you showing him his mistakes. Rebuke the intelligent, the smart one. So there's a beautiful interpretation that says like this. Rebuke the smart individual means when you're rebuking the child, tell him, "You're such a smart boy. It's not befitting for you to do something like that." In other words, tell him how smart he is. Rebuke him by telling him how smart you are, instead of pointing to the negative. It's not befitting. It's not becoming of you. You're such a smart kid. Come on. Point out the positive in him. Kids need to be encouraged. If he's done something special, point it out too. "Oh, I appreciate this. This is so great, so nice of you." This is all normal. This is what I'm just saying now is normal. It is well known, but we sometimes forget about that. And this is extra important when we're dealing with difficult children that need extra attention, extra help, extra guidance. So we have to be even more careful that we apply this in looking at the positive instead of the negative. What if a child needs to be punished? Sometimes punishment is necessary. Sometimes we just have to use all kinds of means to teach a lesson, a painful lesson. It's called tough love, I think, in English. However, the experts recommend finding a solution instead of punishment. We'll sit down and figure out with the child how to resolve this problem instead of punishing. I don't totally agree with this, even though it is correct that the choice should be to find a solution instead of punishment. We don't want to punish. Of course, a parent does not want to punish. But sometimes punishment is a necessity, but it has to be done when the parents are calm. In other words, it has to be communicated that this is disciplinary, that this is as a last resort, we have no choice. Hopefully, that together with or coupled with communication, with love, will have an effect. Only punishment is not great. It's not a good idea. Will not be as effective, perhaps. But punishment is sometimes a necessity. We get lessons from God to awaken us. Parents sometimes need to awaken the child. A teacher needs to awaken the student. A principal needs to do the same. So it's not that punishment is never to be considered. It is to be considered, but together with other approaches as well. When you do that plus other things, then together they may become effective. Give a child the opportunity to prove himself. I think that's a very good idea. It's something that's suggested by the experts. Allow the child to prove himself. Give him a challenge. Let him do something that he's capable of doing that's worthwhile. It will give him satisfaction. It will make him happy. It will perhaps even elevate his self-esteem. These are good ideas that simply can help even kids who have some problem, difficult children. Now comes my favorite. Kids simply don't understand what the parents want from them. They simply don't understand. What does daddy want? I mean, what's so wrong with this? They think they know better. Why are they so upset with me? There's an old Spanish saying, "Quien bien te quiere te hará llorar." And it's very, very true. Who really loves you will make you cry. Did you understand the message over here? If somebody really cares about you, they may make you cry from time to time. They may say things you don't like. But that's because they really care about you. They really love you. And they mean well. And children do not always know that the parents mean well. But that's really the idea here. They really love you. One strategy or one approach that is very, very helpful in life with adults as well, as much as it is with children, is laughter. If you can get somebody to laugh who's a difficult person, I think you're going to make a very strong bond with him. he's going to like you. Because you cannot hate somebody that makes you laugh. That's just pretty much a fact. If you can make someone laugh, if you can make someone smile, humor, that's what it's about. It releases so much pressure. It calms people down. Laughter connects people. It bonds them. If you can successfully do that, even with adults, you're going to see very, very good results with them. Even when you've tried everything and you did not succeed, don't forget there are people out there that perhaps have a better approach. They have more experience. It's important never to give up, never to lose hope. Oh, this child is a lost case. God forbid, never say that about any human being, that they're a lost case. There are very few people that I would say they're a lost case, but never give up hope on anyone. Give them a chance, and if you can't help them, there's somebody out there that perhaps knows the combination to this individual, whether it's a child or an adult. Difficult people. You may not know how to do it yourself. Turn to the experts, to the professionals. Very important also, no matter how complicated raising of the child is, don't be distracted. Pay attention. Supervise him. Look after him. Kids need more supervision today than ever before. Don't be distracted. When raising children, you cannot be distracted. You have to be focused 100%. And last but not least, I think a very powerful tool that in Judaism especially is greatly emphasized is Sipurei Tzadikim, inspirational stories of great people from the past who have met challenges, who've elevated themselves to great heights spiritually, even though the odds were against them, even though they met with many challenges. Inspirational stories. And there are many such stories in many languages. I'm just going to share with you one. It has to do with the Ritvaz, who lived several hundred years ago in Sfat. He was 80 years old at the time this story happened. It was his father's Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of his father. As you know, it's a custom that Jews go and say the Kaddish prayer for the memory, for the soul of those who have departed. So he was going to go pray mincha at the synagogue and say this prayer for his father. But it was a little cold outside. And he was 80 years old. He was an older man. And he hesitated, but then he went. When he came to shul, people haven't arrived yet. So he sat down and he began to cry. And somebody noticed that he was crying, went over to him. Rabbi, I know it's your father's Yortzeit today, but he passed away 50 years ago. He had a good, long life. Why would you want to cry now? He says, you don't understand why I'm crying. Let me tell you who my father was. My parents very much cared about education. They were willing to give everything they owned for their kids' education. I was a gifted child, he says. My father wanted me to have the best teachers, but best teachers cost money. My parents didn't have so much money. But he nevertheless hired a good teacher for me. The teacher went unpaid for 3 months. My parents were poor, but they tried their best, but they couldn't make it for 3 months. They didn't pay the teacher. That teacher sent a note back with me to my father that if he doesn't get paid, he cannot continue teaching me. And I was doing well. My father made his livelihood from building ovens that was not only used for cooking in those days, but also to heat the homes. And it just happened to be that on that day that my father had to pay the teacher, there was a wealthy man in the community who wanted to build a home for his son who just became a groom, a chatan. And he wanted to make an oven for him, a winter oven, a cooking oven, but there were no bricks to be found. The factory stopped making bricks. My father told my mother, we're going to disassemble our oven, and I'm going to use those bricks to build this man's son an oven, because with that money, I'm going to be able to pay him for the 3 months I owe him and for the coming 3 months. We froze that winter. It was so cold. We tried to put all the rags and blankets and we were still cold. But my parents didn't care how cold it was. Their son was going to get a Jewish education, no matter what. He was going to get the best education. They were willing to sacrifice everything, but that their son should have an education. This afternoon, as I got ready to go, I was a little cold. I hesitated, should I go or not? When I remembered what my father and mother were willing to do, how they suffered through the cold of winter so their child should have a Jewish education, I said to myself, look at me and look at my father, what they were willing to do, their devotion for Jewish education. I was a little hesitant about a little cold, should I go to the synagogue or not? They were willing to live with this cold for me. They did this for me. That is why I cried. Very powerful story. I think there's a lot of lessons to learn from this. But last but not least, raising children is not easy. But we must remember that God has given us the kohot, the strength and the means to be able to succeed. He's not just dumping us with a child and you handle him on your own. He's a full partner. He's an active partner. He has given us a tremendous responsibility. He has entrusted us with his soul. But he has also given us the tools and the means that we need to succeed in raising a child. Because he's a full partner. God willing, very, very soon, we're all going to merit the fulfillment of a very beautiful prophecy that's brought down in Malachi, the last of all prophets. That Hashem is going to send us Elyahu Navi, Elyahu the prophet. And what is he going to do? He has also a mission to bring children and parents back together, as the English translation goes. That he may turn the heart of the fathers back through the children and the heart of the children back through the fathers. Parents are going to once again reconnect with the children, children with their parents, both of them with their heritage. This will be a beautiful time to see the two of them, families coming back together. This will be when Mashiach comes. This will be when Elyahu Navi comes. And what will be very, very clear at this time, when this happens, what we're witnessing today, that many, many children will be the ones to bring back their parents b'tshuva. It used to be that was the role of parents, to guide and teach the children. Many, unfortunately, people who are parents today have become so distant from their heritage. But guess what? The children will bring back those parents. This is one of the most powerful signs that this is the fulfillment of the prophecy, that this is what we're going through right now. Baruch Hashem, thank God, many, many kids are rediscovering their roots, rediscovering their heritage, wanting to reconnect, and they don't stop at that. They're reconnecting their parents and their entire family as well. Yiratzon may be the will of God, that God willing, all of these families who are still detached should come back and reconnect with our heritage. Amen.
Amen.